She ruined a young man's life in under 60 seconds, then smiled as he begged not to be fired. That's who Victoria Ashford was, the billionaire's wife everyone feared. Her name alone made the Golden Rose tremble, but power only works until someone refuses to bow. And the new waitress? She didn't just refuse. She knew who Victoria really was before the money. The Golden Rose was the kind of place people entered quietly, as if afraid the marble floors might judge them. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, catching the light from the fireplaces that burned even in summer. Every detail, from the folded napkins to the polished silver, whispered one thing. Wealth ruled here. And no one reminded the staff of that more than Victoria Ashford. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't need to. A glance from her icy blue eyes made seasoned servers feel like children standing before a headmistress. Stories about her floated through the staff room like ghost tales. Everyone knew about Thomas, the university kid who got fired because his sleeve hovered too close to her plate. Everyone remembered the way she watched him cry before turning away with a smile so small it chilled the blood. For 10 years, Victoria Ashford walked into the Golden Rose every Friday at 8 o'clock sharp, taking the same corner booth, ordering the same water, demanding the same impossible standards. She had built a reputation not on kindness, but domination, and the staff had learned to survive her the only way they could, by shrinking. Rachel Bennett did not shrink, at least not on the outside. Inside, she was a storm, but she carried it well, head high, step steady, the face of someone who had nothing left to lose. 3 months earlier, she had been a research assistant for one of London's top investigative journalists. She lived for chasing stories, connecting dots, exposing lies. Then layoffs struck. The department vanished overnight, and with it, her career. After weeks of job hunting and bills piling up, she walked into the Golden Rose desperate enough to trade her pen for an apron. On her first day, George, the veteran waiter with kind eyes and a tired spine, pulled her aside. "See that corner?" he whispered, pointing discreetly. "That's her booth, Victoria Ashford. If you want to survive here, stay far away from it." Rachel nodded, but something about the warning unsettled her. Fear this woman? All because she was married to a billionaire? All because she knew how to weaponize humiliation? Rachel had spent years investigating powerful people. She wasn't impressed easily. But the first time Rachel saw Victoria walk in, something clicked. The woman did not just enter the restaurant. She consumed it. Conversations dimmed. Servers straightened. Even her husband, Lawrence, gray at the temples, shoulders slumped, seemed to shrink beside her, like a man used to living under a constant storm cloud. Rachel could feel the room tense as she worked nearby. And as she watched Victoria dismiss dishes, glare at servers, and issue quiet, lethal complaints, she understood the truth. This wasn't confidence. It was performance. Ruthless, polished, suffocating performance. Still, Rachel stayed focused on her own tables, until destiny nudged her closer. The waiter assigned to Victoria's section called in sick. The manager scanned the staff like a general choosing a sacrifice, and his gaze landed on Rachel. "Bennett," he said quietly, "you're on table 12 tonight." A silence fell over the room. Even George winced. Rachel just adjusted her apron. She wasn't afraid, but she had no idea that stepping toward Victoria Ashford's table was the first step toward discovering the secret that would unravel everything. Rachel approached table 12 with steady steps, though the weight of every stare pressed against her spine. The Golden Rose seemed to hold its breath as she stopped beside the Ashford's booth. The air around Victoria felt colder somehow, like her presence absorbed warmth, but Rachel kept her voice even. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Ashford. My name is Rachel, and I'll be serving you tonight." Victoria didn't look up. Still water lime, paper-thin slice. Her tone was dismissive, almost bored, the voice of a queen acknowledging a servant. Rachel nodded. Of course. She moved with precision, water poured correctly, glasses aligned, the bread basket containing only sourdough rolls, the kind Victoria preferred. For a moment, Rachel thought she might get through the evening without incident. But Victoria Ashford never allowed peace to last long. It began with the soup. Rachel carried the steaming bowl carefully, hands steady, steps measured. She set it down gently, just as she'd practiced. She saw the melted cheese, the rising steam, the perfect presentation. It should have been impossible to criticize. Victoria studied the bowl as though examining it for flaws visible only to her. She lifted a spoonful, raised it halfway, then slowly lowered it again. Her voice sliced through the room. Is there a problem in the kitchen tonight? Rachel kept her posture straight. Not at all, Mrs. Ashford. Victoria tapped the bowl with her spoon. This is cold. Rachel saw the steam. The entire table saw the steam. But this wasn't about temperature. This was about power. I'll bring a fresh bowl immediately, Rachel said, calm and professional. Victoria placed a perfectly manicured hand over the bowl. Don't bother, the moment is ruined. Her gaze cut sideways at her husband. You see, Lawrence, even simple standards are too much for this staff. Lawrence sighed quietly, staring into his drink. It's just soup, Victoria. It is never just soup, she snapped. Her eyes returned to Rachel, sharp as glass. What did you say your name was? Rachel, ma'am. Victoria repeated it, slowly, as if the word itself offended her. Well, Rachel, if you expect to last here longer than a week, I suggest you learn the difference between hot and cold. A hush fell over nearby tables. People weren't eating anymore. They were watching. Rachel didn't blink. Thank you for the feedback, Mrs. Ashford. I'll ensure everything else is perfect. She carried the bowl to the kitchen, feeling the heat of every silent judgment behind her. The head chef exploded the moment she crossed the threshold. That soup was perfect, he hissed. She's unbelievable. I know, Rachel murmured, but she wasn't testing the soup. The chef frowned. Then what was she testing? Me. Back on the floor, Rachel continued serving with precision. She noticed something strange. Victoria kept glancing at her, not with triumph, but irritation. Rachel wasn't reacting the way she expected. No tears, no panic, no begging. Victoria's prey wasn't behaving like prey. When the Ashfords finally rose to leave, Lawrence paused beside Rachel. He discreetly slipped a folded bill into her hand. I'm sorry, he whispered. She's under stress. Rachel nodded politely, but inside she felt something shift. Stress didn't excuse cruelty, and cruelty this refined always hid something deeper, something fragile. As she unfolded the bill later, 200 pounds, she realized something else. Victoria Ashford wasn't just cruel. She was terrified of something Rachel hadn't uncovered. Yet. The next morning, Rachel woke with the familiar weight of exhaustion pressing behind her eyes. But beneath it, something else stirred. Curiosity. Not anger, not revenge, but the instinct she'd honed during her years in investigative journalism. Victoria's cruelty wasn't random. It was calculated, and cruelty that consistent usually grew from something being hidden. Rachel arrived early for her shift, hoping for quiet. Instead, she found the staff room buzzing. George was at the center of a group of waiters, shaking his head. She ruined Daniel last night, he muttered. He hasn't answered his phone all morning. Poor kid probably thinks he'll never work again. Rachel listened silently. Victoria didn't just ruin nights, she ruined lives. For a decade, the Golden Rose had been her kingdom, and the staff were pawns she rearranged at will. It should have frightened Rachel. Instead, it focused her. When the restaurant quieted around mid-afternoon, she found herself leaning beside George at the bar. Tell me about her, Rachel said softly. Not the rumors. What was she like when she first started coming here? George paused, polishing a wine glass slowly. Different, he said, almost unsure of herself. She watched everyone. How people held their forks, how they spoke French to the sommelier. It was like she was learning a part for a play. Rachel frowned. Learning it? Oh yes, he said. She didn't arrive as Victoria Ashford. She became her. The comment lodged itself in Rachel's mind like a hooked thread. People didn't reinvent themselves for no reason. Reinvention meant erasing something, or someone. That night, Rachel went home and opened her laptop. She typed Victoria Sterling, the maiden name Victoria always listed in society magazines. The results were clean. Too clean. A handful of charity galas, a couple of carefully curated interviews, and profile pieces that sounded more like PR scripts than journalism. Almost nothing about her early life. That's impossible, Rachel muttered. Rich people always had digital footprints. School photos, mentions in alumni newsletters, family business records. But with Victoria, everything before her engagement to Lawrence was fog. Suspicious fog. Rachel dug deeper, shifting from main search engines to older archives. Still nothing. The woman had materialized from nowhere, so Rachel changed tactics. She searched for engagement announcements. Those articles had more details: how the couple met, the whirlwind romance, the supposed background of a quiet, respectable woman from Bath. Too perfect? Rachel stared at Victoria's glossy engagement portrait. Something about the eyes, the cold sharpness, felt familiar, but not in the aristocratic way Victoria wanted people to believe. A thought struck her. Rachel dragged the image into a reverse image search tool. At first, nothing. Then, on page 12 of results, something flickered. An old, half-broken website for a modeling agency in Manchester from the early 2000s. Heart thudding, Rachel clicked. The page loaded slowly, lines of outdated code flickering, until a grid of photos appeared. And there she was. Younger, rougher, blonde hair badly dyed, wearing heavy makeup. But unmistakably the same bone structure, the same eyes, the name beneath the photo, Vicky Brightwell. Rachel sat back, stunned. Victoria Ashford, the billionaire's icy, untouchable wife, was actually a failed promotional model from Manchester who had reinvented herself entirely. A woman with no real pedigree, no old money, no aristocratic past, a woman who built her entire empire of fear on a lie. Rachel exhaled. Now she understood the cruelty, the overreactions, the obsession with perfection. Victoria wasn't protecting her power. She was protecting her secret, and Rachel had just found the first crack. Rachel stared at the old modeling page long after the screen stopped loading. The image didn't lie. The sharp jawline, the intense eyes, even the faint curve of the lips. It was Victoria, not the polished, icy queen of the Golden Rose, but a younger, desperate version of her, a woman who wanted something more than the life she'd been born into. Rachel leaned closer. Vicky Brightwell. The name alone felt like a key turning in a lock. If Victoria had worked so hard to erase this identity, then the truth had power. Real power. But Rachel had learned long ago that information meant nothing without context. She needed more. She searched the name again, this time adding Manchester and modeling. Old forum posts popped up. A few grainy photos from event nights, and then something unexpected. Links to a forgotten reality show called Motorway Dreams, where Vicky Brightwell had been one of the featured promo girls. Rachel clicked one of the clips. The pixelated footage showed a younger Victoria arguing heatedly with another contestant over makeup. The accent was thick, unmistakably working class. The tone was harsh, defensive, nothing like the cold, aristocratic persona she wore now. Rachel sat back slowly. Victoria didn't just reinvent herself, she erased herself. But why? The next day, Rachel worked her shift as though nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. She watched Victoria's patterns, her obsession with status, her fixation on appearances, her cruelty toward anyone she considered beneath her. Now Rachel knew why those people bothered her so deeply. They reminded Victoria of the person she used to be. Later that afternoon, Rachel gathered more clues. She spoke casually with George during a slow hour. "Did she always act like this?" Rachel asked. "So cold?" "Oh, no," George replied, thinking. At first she was tense, awkward even. She copied other rich wives. It was almost sad, really. But once she married Lawrence, the change came fast. She stopped pretending and started performing. Performing. That word echoed in Rachel's mind long after her shift ended. That night she dug deeper into the Motorway Dreams archives. She found forum threads discussing behind-the-scenes drama, comments from people who claimed to know Vicki Brightwell personally. Some described her as ambitious, others called her volatile. But one detail appeared again and again. There was a breakdown, a finale meltdown so intense the producers never aired it. Rachel's pulse quickened. She searched for hours, chasing half-dead links, abandoned fan pages, any scrap of footage. But the meltdown video remained elusive. Still, the evidence was clear. Victoria had rewritten her entire history, burying the messier version of herself. As Rachel built her file, screenshots, notes, old clips, a picture emerged. Victoria wasn't a villain born from privilege. She was a woman terrified of being ordinary, terrified of being Vicki Brightwell again. Rachel closed her laptop, rubbing her tired eyes. She hadn't planned to expose anyone. She didn't want revenge. But knowing the truth changed everything. Victoria's cruelty wasn't simply arrogance, it was fear, and fear made people unpredictable. As Rachel crawled into bed, one last thought settled deep in her mind. Victoria Ashford wasn't just hiding her past. She was running from it, and sooner or later people running from their past always slipped. Rachel just didn't know how soon that moment would come, or how explosive it would be. 3 weeks passed before Victoria Ashford returned to the Golden Rose, but when she finally did, something felt different, eerily different. She didn't glide in like a queen entering her palace. She stormed in, alone. No husband, no diamond-studded gown, no polite mask of superiority. Tonight she wore a razor-sharp black suit and an expression carved from pure fury. The staff stiffened instantly. Whispers rippled through the restaurant. Rachel sensed the shift before she even saw Victoria. A silence spread across the dining room like a warning, and then she appeared at her usual booth, dropping her handbag onto the table with a thud that felt deliberate. Final. Dangerous. She didn't wait to be seated. She didn't look at the menu. She lifted one finger. Straight at Rachel. Mr. Peaton tried stepping forward, but Rachel gave the smallest shake of her head. She knew this moment had been coming from the second she uncovered Victoria's past. Rachel walked toward her, steady, grounded, refusing to show an ounce of fear. "Good evening, Mrs. Ashford," she said smoothly. Victoria didn't greet her. She didn't blink. She simply tapped the chair across from her. "Sit." "I'm working, Mrs. Ashford, if you'd like." "Sit," Victoria repeated, her voice so low it vibrated. "Or I buy this restaurant by dawn and fire every person in it." Gasps echoed around the room. Rachel sat. Victoria leaned in, eyes blazing. "I don't know how you found that name," she hissed. "I don't care how, but let me explain something to you, Miss Bennet." She said the name like poison. "I have had my husband's legal team investigate every part of your life, every embarrassing detail, every debt, every failure." Victoria smiled, a cold, dead thing. "You are nothing. And when I finish with you, you won't be able to get a job washing dishes. I will make one phone call and erase you." Most people would have broken under those words. Rachel didn't even blink. She waited, patiently, calmly. And when Victoria finally grew quiet enough to breathe, Rachel spoke. "You're right about one thing. she said softly. "I am a researcher." Victoria's confidence flickered. "And I'm very, very good at my job." That flicker became panic. Rachel's voice dropped, but every table around them heard each syllable. "You're not Victoria Sterling from Bath. You're Vicky Brightwell, from Manchester." Victoria's entire face drained of color. Rachel continued, relentless. "I found the modeling agency. I found the reality show. I found the footage no one was supposed to see. The screaming, the breakdown, the tiara." Victoria's hands began to shake. "That's who you are," Rachel said, "and that's who you've been running from." The restaurant held its breath. Rachel leaned forward, meeting Victoria's collapsing gaze. "Here's what happens next. You leave. You don't come back. You stop threatening the staff. You stop hurting people who can't fight back." She paused, voice turning to steel. "And if you so much as whisper another threat, I release everything." For the first time since entering the restaurant, Victoria had no words. Only terror, only silence, only the truth she'd buried clawing its way back up. Slowly, stiffly, she stood. She didn't look at Rachel. She didn't look at the staff. She simply walked out, quiet, defeated, exposed. The doors closed behind her, and the golden rose finally exhaled. The moment Victoria Ashford stepped out of the golden rose, something shifted inside the restaurant. Something subtle at first, like tension melting off the walls. Then it spread, growing into a wave of quiet relief. For the first time in 10 years, the place breathed. Staff members exchanged stunned glances, unsure whether to cheer or collapse. Rachel didn't celebrate. She simply stood, letting the adrenaline settle. The hardest part wasn't the confrontation itself. It was staying calm while the entire room watched a billionaire's wife unravel. She had faced the monster and somehow kept her voice steady. George approached first. His eyes were bright, almost emotional. "You did it," he whispered. "I've waited years to see someone stop her." Rachel smiled faintly. "I didn't stop her. I just showed her what she's been running from." The staff erupted in quiet applause. Even Mr. Peaton, usually stiff and terrified of offending anyone wealthy, placed a gentle hand on Rachel's shoulder. "I don't know what you said," he murmured. "But thank you." Rachel just nodded and went back to work. It wasn't heroism, not to her. It was simply the first time in months she felt like Rachel Bennett again. Not the broke waitress struggling to survive, but the investigator who could see patterns others missed. Word spread through the restaurant world fast. Whispers traveled from kitchen to kitchen. Someone finally took Victoria Ashford down. Someone exposed the truth behind her cruelty. And the name everyone whispered wasn't Vicky Brightwell, it was Rachel. Within a month, the staff at Golden Rose stood straighter. They smiled more. They weren't afraid to breathe near a plate. The curse was broken. But the story didn't end there. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Rachel received a call from an unfamiliar number. She considered ignoring it, but curiosity won. "Miss Bennett," a tired voice said, "this is Lawrence Ashford." Rachel froze. He didn't sound powerful or cold. He sounded like a man carrying years of quiet exhaustion. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for doing something I should have done long ago." Rachel blinked. "I didn't do it for you." "I know," he replied softly. "But you showed me the truth. I stayed silent because I didn't want to face who she really was. You forced us both to face it." A pause. "We're divorcing," he said. "I'm finally ending it." Rachel didn't know what to say. She didn't feel satisfaction, just a strange, bittersweet clarity. The truth didn't just free the staff, it freed him too. When the call ended, Rachel sat quietly, thinking about everything that had led her here, losing her journalism job, becoming a waitress, meeting George, watching Daniel cry, discovering Vicky Brightwell, standing up in front of an entire restaurant. Every step, Every hardship had led her to the moment she chose courage instead of fear. In the weeks that followed, Rachel accepted a position at David Chun's investigation firm. She became one of his top investigators, sharp, fearless, relentless. The same qualities Victoria tried to crush became the very ones that carried her forward. Rachel often thought about the Golden Rose, not because of the humiliation or tension, but because of the lesson she learned there. Bullies don't fear strength. They fear truth. And truth, once spoken, can't be buried again. Rachel Bennett wasn't a waitress anymore. She wasn't the girl who lost her job. She was the woman who stood up to the most feared person in the room, and won. And that, she realized, was the kind of power no billionaire could buy.